Good day, everyone. I am Mary Ann Arquipala,
I'm Rhythmistic Marada.
and today we're going to be discussing about the different types of quantitative research designs. We will start by first explaining what research design is. Research design refers to the overall plan or strategy that guides a research project from its conception to the final analysis of data. A good research design serves as a blueprint for how you as a researcher will collect and analyze data while ensuring consistency, reliability, and validity throughout your study. To give you an overview, quantitative research is divided into two major types. The first one is experimental research, which is subdivided according to true experimental and quasi-experimental. Quasi-experimental design comes in different types such as matched comparison group design, time series quasi-experimental design, counterbalance quasi-experimental design, and single subject quasi-experimental design. While the other one is non-experimental, which is subdivided according to descriptive, comparative, correlative, survey, and ex post facto. At this point, we shall now be discussing the definition of experimental research design. Experimental research design is a quantitative research design that bases its research method on the scientific activity called experiment, in which a test or examination of a thing under a manipulated or controlled environment is done to determine the validity or truthfulness of such thing. This design involves two groups of subjects: the experimental group, on which the condition, treatment, or intervention is applied, and the control group that is not given any treatment or condition. Following this experimental design, you conduct two kinds of tests: pre-test for both groups and post-test for the experimental or treatment group to see the difference between them based on the effects of the treatment or condition given to the experimental group. There are two types of experimental research designs, starting with true experimental research design. The true experimental research design aims to determine causal relationship among variables. Also, it relies on statistical analysis to approve or disapprove a hypothesis. It is also worth noting that the true experimental research is considered as the most accurate type of experimental design. Furthermore, it may be conducted with or without a pretest, and it always involves a control group and a test group. Other characteristics of the true experimental research include variable manipulation and random selection of participants. Furthermore, it is worth noting that true experimental research is always conducted in a controlled setting, and that intervention is always present. Let's consider this example here. A researcher wants to determine the effect of classical music on academic performance of students. As mentioned earlier, since this is a true experimental research, it must have two groups. One would be the control group, while the other one would be the test or experimental group. In the control group, everything is held constant or regular, which means that there would be no intervention, which means that there's no music played in their classes. While in the test or experimental group, there is the presence of intervention, which is the classical music. This intervention can further be manipulated through variable manipulation, such as frequency and music volume. At the end of this study, the researcher then gives an assessment between the control group without music and the test or experimental group with music by looking at their academic performance. Based on this example, we can have the conclusion that playing classical music while studying has a positive effect on the student's academic performance. Another experimental research design is quasi-experimental research. Similar to the true experimental research, the quasi-experimental research aims to determine causal relationships among variables. It bears resemblance to true experimental research, but different, because in quasi-experimental research, participants are not randomly assigned, and it involves conduct of pre-test and post-test. Furthermore, other characteristics of the quasi-experimental research involve variable manipulation. It is also conducted in a controlled setting, and that intervention is also present. Let's look at this example here, in which a teacher wants to test reading intervention program as aid for students with low-level comprehension. Since this is a quasi-experimental research, this study would usually start with a pretest. In this example, the pretest would be a reading comprehension test that would help determine who among the students have passed and who among the students have failed. Recognizing the students who have failed is important, as these students will be considered as participants for the reading intervention program. From there, we proceed with intervention, which is the reading intervention program. For this particular example, once the participants have been identified, they shall undergo the reading intervention program, which can further be manipulated through duration of the program, the schedules given to the students, the reading activities given, and the teaching strategy that is used. After undergoing intervention, we now proceed with the post-test, which is another reading comprehension test. The students who once failed the reading comprehension test given before, who have undergone the reading intervention program, will then be given another reading comprehension test to determine whether they are going to pass or still fail. So if they have passed, we can have the conclusion that the reading intervention program is effective in improving the reading comprehension of students with low-level comprehension. Quasi-experimental research designs comes in different types such as matched comparison group design, time series quasi-experimental design, counterbalanced quasi-experimental design, and single subject experimental design.
Matched
Comparison group design. In this quasi-experimental design, instead of selecting participants for the control group, you get a set of participants that shows close similarities with the experimental or treatment group based on one or more important variables. Time series quasi-experimental design. Your act of controlling the variables in this case is through multiple observations of the subjects before and after the treatment or condition applied to the experimental group. The purpose of serial observations is to see the connection between the pre-test and post-test based on the taking place of the treatment or condition. Counterbalanced quasi-experimental design. Here, control is applied to one group to examine the effects of all treatment and conditions to control variables. For instance, negative results coming from 3-time observations are counterbalanced or given weight that is equated with positive results from 4 or 5-time observations. And lastly, single subject quasi-experimental design. This design is used when the population is so large that you find difficulty in choosing a group to study. So, you decide to apply the condition or treatment to a single subject like a class of learners, then later find out the effects of the treatment on the entire class. At this point, Before we proceed with discussing other quantitative research design, let us have first a recap of the similarities and differences between the experimental research and quasi-experimental research. The true experimental research design and quasi-experimental research design are similar because both determine causal relationships. They also have intervention and involves manipulation of variables. They are also the same because both are conducted in a controlled setting. In terms of differences, in true experimental research, there is a random selection of participants, whereas in quasi-experimental research, the participants are not randomly selected. Also, true experimental research may be conducted with or without pretest, while quasi-experimental research involves pretest and post-test. And finally, true experimental research involves a test group and a control group, while quasi-experimental research does not have any control group.